What's up? What's up? It's EJ Stewart, Tommy Beard coming at you with a new episode of Orange and Blue Bloods. And we got a very, very special guest for you coming today. Ian Begley, SNY NBA Insider, joins us. So this will be a fun show. First, let me get to Tommy real quick. Tommy, how you feeling? Should be a big show today. I got a lot of questions for Ian. I know you do as well.
Yeah, we got Beggs in the house, so let's get into it, EJ.
Let's absolutely do it. Ian Begley coming at you right after this.
If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beard. Let's get to it, New York.
Once again, this is Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast, Odyssey WFA, an original podcast you can get wherever you get your shows, including the free Odyssey app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service to get these episodes every time we drop. Today's episode, very special because we are joined by one of the best basketball reporters in the game. He is an NBA insider covering the Knicks and Nets for SNY, where you can see his work on television and online. Ian Begley joins us now to talk about all things Knicks offseason and preview storylines for the upcoming season. Ian, great to have you as always. How's the offseason treat you?
EJ, I appreciate the kind words, man. Thank you. Offseason is good so far. We were talking before the show. I hope we're in a little bit of a quiet period. I'm going to knock on wood every time I say that because this is the kind of time of year where team people kind of take a break, go on vacation. So I wouldn't think there's going to be any serious talks around Harden or Lillard, but stranger things have happened. So hopefully we're in a quiet period right now.
We certainly hope so. We don't want to repeat of last year where you had the Donovan Mitchell saga play out all the way into August. And I don't know if that's going to be a situation we have potentially with these two guys, Lillard and, of course, James Harden. But I know Ian's, of course, going to be on it like all the great NBA insiders we have in this game. So, Ian, started off the show, I want to start with the latest news we got with the Knicks, which was the Knicks signing former first-round pick, Dylan Windler. He signed a two-way contract, a 1-year deal with the Knicks. Windler was drafted 26th overall by the Cavs in 2019, but he has struggled to stay on the court due to various injuries. He suffered an ankle injury last year before the season that didn't allow him to be back on the court until February. He kind of spent the rest of the time over in Cleveland's G League team. What do the Knicks see in Windler? What do the Knicks think they're getting with this player?
I think what you referenced, EJ, the former first-round pick, there's clearly talent there. They obviously see some untapped potential because you don't make this move with knowing that you're going to have to make a corresponding move to either waive someone or convert somebody's contract. Clearly, they see something in Windler that maybe other teams haven't been able to get out of him. And that's why you make a move like this at the back end of the roster. You hope that, it hits. Whether it hits as a Dylan being a rotation player or a situational player, you hope that he sticks in some way, shape, or form. And I think they've done pretty well, it seems, on their two-way deals. We'll see if anything else shakes loose, but they have to like the group that they have on two-way contracts at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ian. And just you talked about corresponding moves. I assume that, it's been reported that Trevor Keels and they're going to part ways while still maintaining his G League rights. Is that what you're hearing as well? And does it sound like, Keels' days with the Knicks may have come to an end?
It does sound like that's the corresponding move. Keels getting waived, as first reported by my buddy Fred Katz. So if that is indeed the case, no reason to think it wouldn't be. It doesn't speak highly of the draft process when they took Keels in the second round. And you just wonder, man, such a young player, what did they see internally that led them to get to this point where you're waiving him without even wanting to see any more from this young player out of Duke? And, I had heard that they weren't all that impressed by what they had seen in Westchester, that there were some conditioning issues over the course of Keels' tenure in New York. I don't know what ultimately led them or will lead them to pull the plug to make room for Windler. But, yeah, just not how you'd want to see a young draft pick go through your system if you're the Knicks.
And it definitely hurts considering they didn't have a first-round pick last season. They came in with no draft picks this season. So Keels essentially was their young player, so to speak, and now he apparently will be on the out. So, okay, we enter year 4 of the Leon Rose regime. So Many kind of didn't know what to expect from this regime. Of course, he's a longtime agent, but this is a first time go for him as a basketball executive. Do you think the Knicks brass is comfortable where the franchise is positioned right now, given where they are, not just in the Eastern Conference, but in the NBA pecking order as we enter year 3 of the Leon Rose era?
Yeah, I think they feel good about it. I mean, they've made the playoffs twice, bounced back from a tough 21-22 season. Their big free agent acquisition so far, Jalen Brunson, has outperformed probably anybody's expectations outside of himself. Rick Brunson and Leon Rose and Tom Thibodeau and William Wesley. He was fantastic. So I think by and large, you have to like where you are if you're Leon Rose. And more importantly, Nick Governor Jim Dolan, I assume that he likes where the Knicks are right now under Leon Rose's stewardship. So, yeah, there have been hits, there have been misses, but by and large, they're in a spot now where they've got the draft capital, they've got the young players to be involved in bigger trades, and they also feel like they have this young core together here now where they can win on their own without that big acquisition, although we all know the expectation is that big acquisition is going to come at some point.
Yeah, Beggs, do you think with the success they've had last season, and obviously you mentioned that the draft capital and the young players on favorable team-friendly contracts, that they're still kind of eyeing waiting for that shoe to drop, whether it's Embiid or Doncic or one of the huge megawatt names. But that success last year kind of bought them some time. They don't have to make a push for, say, a guy like Karl Anthony Towns or Zach LaVine or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think, both things are true. I think they did earn themselves some rope here by last season, winning a playoff series, getting to a place that not many observers had them going second round of the playoffs. So they certainly bought themselves some time where you saw, I think, pretty sure if they wanted to have Karl Anthony Towns, to trade for Karl Anthony Towns, if they wanted to do that this summer, they could have gotten that done. So they did take a patient approach here. And so they do have more clock, but at the same time, we heard James Dolan on the record in an interview with WFAN saying one of the reasons he brought Leon Rose in was because of his connection to star players. So, clearly the governor's expectation in Dolan is that they eventually land a big star. Now, they hit a home run with Jalen Brunson, but I think there's still more to be done when you're talking about big player acquisitions. They're in no rush, clearly, and they don't have to be in a rush, Tommy, because, as you mentioned, they had that big year last year.
And turning back the clock just to last season, because we saw the Donovan Mitchell negotiations play out over the course of months that ended up with him not becoming a New York Knick. Since then, we've heard various names come up. We've heard the OG Anunobies. We've heard the Zach LaVines come up recently, Karl Anthony Towns this offseason as well. Since the Donovan Mitchell situation and the fallout from that, have the Knicks come anywhere close to making one of those big kind of moves, or are they kind of been not close at all in terms of bringing in a star player, maybe not of Mitchell's caliber, but maybe a little lesser than that?
Yeah, my understanding on Anunoby was that they were ready to be aggressive at the deadline, but there was a concern about if Anunoby would then sign in New York long term if they traded for him. So I would assume that that's probably the closest they got in terms of acquiring a very talented player after those Donovan Mitchell talks. I don't think anything has gotten close to date for them. I was told a couple weeks ago that they had a level that they were comfortable going for a player like Harden, and they weren't going to exceed that level. So, if the price falls to where they're comfortable with it, maybe they go ahead there. But I can't see that happening. And so I don't think they've gotten super close on anything else. They had some contact with the Bulls on Zach LaVine. I was never under the impression that they got into consequential talks on LaVine. So I think Anunoby was probably the closest they got. And that's something to keep an eye on, for me at least, going into this season, because we don't know kind of where Toronto is. What are they going to do? Are they going to pivot at some point to trade off some of their top players? Does that mean Siakam? They've had talks on Siakam. They haven't had talks on Anunoby. As far as I know, as of earlier this month, they were not engaging on Anunoby. But during the season, maybe things change. So that's why I would keep an eye on the Anunoby situation if I were a Knicks fan.
We talked about Keels, their lone draft pick the last 2 seasons, and the other move, regarding a draft pick was Obi Toppin, who they basically dumped for, just second round picks. So obviously not the ideal scenario to played out, and there are reasons why Obi's tenure wasn't as successful as either side would have hoped. That being said, they're entering. It seems like they're one. Obviously, their one big move this offseason was signing Dante DiVincenzo. Do you feel that they're comfortable heading into next season with what we would view as kind of a lack of a true backup power forward? Do you think they're comfortable playing Josh Hart big minutes there? Maybe Barrett will spend some time kind of at the 4 spot, or do you think they bring in a veteran here before camp starts?
Based on what I had heard, just in terms of their comfort level with this current roster, what I heard in terms of people in touch with the Knicks a few weeks ago was that they didn't think that they knew that other moves had to be made. Now, I don't know if that meant something before training camp or if that meant just a bigger picture. We're not done constructing this roster, but I think there was a belief, according to people in touch with them, that they knew, some other moves had to be made to balance this thing out. Specifically, though, on the backup 4, I have to think that they have a comfort level with Josh Hart, RJ Barrett, getting minutes and small lineups at the 4 behind Julius Randle, because that rotation last year, as you guys know, that 9-man rotation, that turned the season around for them. And so if you're going to bring in somebody else, bring in another free agent, JaMychal Green, whoever it is, you're opening things up to a 10-man rotation. And I just think that based on how things went last year with 9 guys, Thibodeau would want to stick to that 9-man rotation. So I just think there's a level of comfort there going into the year without that traditional backup 4, because you can mix, you can match bigger lineups. Maybe you see Jerko Sims, Tom Thibodeau like the lineups where Sims and Isaiah Hartenstein shared the floor when Mitchell Robinson was out last year. So I think there are options there that don't include bringing in an outside free agent.
Tommy mentioned the departure of Obi Toppin, and a lot has been made of the relationship Toppin may or may not have had with Tom Thibodeau, or how he felt about his role. Was there any toxicity that you understand regarding his relationship with Tibbs and the Knick organization, or was this just kind of a, hey, we're just doing business and this is what's best for you, this is what's best for us, and we're just going to move on?
I think there was frustration on Obi Toppin's part. I don't know if I would call it toxicity, because that reaches a higher level. And as all 3 of us know, there's been plenty of toxicity around the Knicks in the past.
Sure.
So we know what that level is. So maybe I wouldn't go there, but Obi certainly wanted a bigger role. He wanted more minutes. He wanted consistent minutes. And he would get yanked after a mistake or two pretty regularly over his 3-year tenure with the Knicks. So certainly there was frustration there. And I think Obi looks at this Indiana situation as a chance to show what he can do, and to earn more minutes, earn a bigger rotation spot. And so I think there's optimism there. But I don't think it was just strictly business. I do think there was some frustration there. But I'll say this too. Tom Thibodeau has made decisions around some of these younger Knicks, and the decisions so far, by and large, seem to have been validated by what's happened. I'm thinking about Cam Reddish. I'm thinking about Kevin Knox. I'm thinking about Dennis Smith Jr. You go back and you see who he's played and who he hasn't played in terms of the young guys, and it seems like he has a pretty good read on what's going on in his gym and who deserves minutes, who doesn't. Maybe he was wrong on Toppin. We'll find out. But just recent history suggests that he has a pretty good read on things when it comes to young players.
I think we'll all circle the Knicks Pacers game next year on our calendar and look forward to it. Speaking of young Knicks and their relationships with the front office and the coaching staff, Emmanuel, quickly, kind of the one piece of business moving the remainder of the summer. The Knicks have right up until the night before the start of the 2023-24 regular season to sign him to a contract extension. 2 questions. Gut feeling, do you think the 2 sides agreed to a contract extension prior to the start of the season? And if I told you the over-under, I put the number at 4 years, let's say $90 million, do you think it's under or over that number?
Yeah, I would say I do think that they're more likely to come to an agreement than not. I mean, Quickley has earned a significant salary based on the way he has taken steps forward over the course of his career, particularly last season. I don't think the Knicks are in position where they can potentially lose him for nothing, which would be next year when he's a restricted free agent. So I would assume that they do come to an agreement. As far as that 4 for $90, if I'm guessing right now, I probably would say a little bit under. I don't, 20 in that area, a little over 20, a little under 20. I think that's kind of the sweet spot. But, the idea that Quickley has had this big season, and I would assume he and his representation will want to take advantage of that. I wonder if it's difficult for team and player to find common ground on a number. But if I'm making a guess, I would guess that it's under 4 for $90.
Interesting. So we talked earlier about Obi Toppin, and one of the reasons why he's gone is essentially because he was blocked by Julius Randle, who remains a polarizing player among Knicks fans, despite making 2 All-NBA teams in the last 3 years. It appears the team doesn't seem to share the same frustration as some fans with some of his uneven play and his demeanor. Have the Knicks ever seriously considered trading Julius Randle? And if not, what do the Knicks see that maybe some of his detractors don't?
I think there was strong consideration given to the idea of moving Julius that offseason that they drafted Obi Toppin. Outside of that, I'm not sure. I don't know if maybe before the Halliburton top draft too, there was consideration that Halliburton Toppin draft. There was consideration to moving him, but I don't know how close things got to the finish line. But obviously it didn't happen, and I know that there are definitely people up and down the organization, including the very top, that think very highly of Julius Randle and appreciate what he has done for this Knicks team night in and night out. In terms of the disconnect between how the organization views Julius and how fans do, I mean, I don't know. Like, that's an individual kind of debate that a fan could have with Leon Rose. Like, I'm not sure how all the fans feel, those disgruntled fans feel about Randle. But I think in general, the Knicks see Randle as more valuable to them on their team, playing night in and night out, than he would be in trading him and getting, XYZ back that might not equal the sum of what Randle brings to them every night and has brought to them every night for more often than not over the past 3 years. So I think that's part of it. I don't think anyone is untouchable, but coming into this offseason, things that I'd heard and early on in free agency were that he was highly unlikely to be moved. And maybe for a top player, he would have been moved, but there was no appetite towards, just getting off of him just to get off of him. And clearly that was the case when the Knicks opted to trade Obi Toppin, because you're saying, without saying it, that Julius Randle is continuing to be our guy. He's going to continue to get major minutes for us at the 4 spot.
Yeah, Nick's more committed to Mr. Randle now more than ever. One player where there is obviously a disconnect between player and coach and franchise, at least based on his comments, Evan Fournier has, with that recent interview this offseason, kind of let it be known, understandably so, as a proud professional, that he's kind of been frustrated to not be a part of the rotation. Do you think it's a given that he's traded in the next month or so, next 2 months before the start of the season? Or do you think there's a possibility Knicks hang on to him, knowing that his $18-19 million contract could be, ballast in a larger trade in terms of salary cap filler? They hold on to the deadline. Do you think that's a possibility as well?
Yeah, I mean, just from a human perspective, I would hope that the Knicks find something that works for them, sending Evan Fournier somewhere else, because, basketball decisions are basketball decisions. And from a basketball perspective, the decision to remove Fournier from the rotation was justified based on the results, because the Knicks took off when they had that 9-man rotation after removing Fournier and Derrick Rose. But, you're putting this guy kind of in the closet for another season, another half a season. I just don't think that's a great way to do business. I know the Knicks value his contract highly as a expiring deal, and a lot of teams, given the new CBA, would love to have a big expiring contract because it would allow them to shed some salary. I know that the Spurs and the Knicks had talked during the offseason about Fournier, I know some people with the Spurs saw the benefits of adding Fournier to the roster, but I think that the Knicks have been totally unwilling to attach any draft compensation to a Fournier deal. And so maybe that's a sticking point there. And there's going to be different trades made, I think, between now and training camp, now and the start of the regular season. So I think the Knicks are going to have opportunities again to move Fournier. But at this point, I don't know, it just feels like they're comfortable going into the season with him on the roster, out of the rotation, and disgruntled again.
Ian Bagley joins us of SNY. I want to talk quickly about Dante DiVincenzo, a player the Knicks did add this offseason. Of course, John Hart electing to opt into his 1 year player option, allowing the Knicks to give Dante the full mid-level exception. How do the Knicks envision DiVincenzo's impact on the club this year?
Yeah, I think similar to Josh Hart, and they're not carbon copies of each other. I don't think it's fair to say that, but there's the idea that DiVincenzo, versatile defensively, and brings a lot on offense as far as, being able to cut without the ball. He knocked down, I think, 39% of his threes last year with Golden State. So if he can replicate that, he helps the Knicks in perimeter shooting where they could use the help based on what we saw in the playoffs last year. So I think he brings a lot. I think he's a versatile player, and they see him just bolstering that second unit, and maybe like Hart, a player who can slide in and out of that starting lineup in the second unit because of his versatility. So I know that Leon Rose had seen DiVincenzo as a target entering even the draft and looking ahead towards free agency. So he was a top, near if not at the top of their board, and they got their guy. And so we'll see how it works out. To me, the interesting thing is, if DiVincenzo comes in and plays, he's going to play 20-plus minutes, who does that take minutes away from? How do you work that out with the backcourt / wings? Who doesn't get minutes with DiVincenzo coming in here and getting minutes, significant minutes this coming season? It's going to be interesting to see how Tom Thibodeau wades his way through that situation.
Last one from me, Beggs, and thanks again for joining us today. Really appreciate the time. We talked about Randle, we talked about and Brunson's obviously is as untouchable as a Knick can be at the current moment. Barrett, do you think they view him along those same lines as kind of a core, one of those essential pieces for the movement of the franchise, or if the right deal came along, the right opportunity to improve, whether that's an OG Anunoby or a player of a similar ilk, that they'd include it would include him in a deal? Do you get the sense that the way they feel about Barrett is kind of they place him on that high pedestal?
Yeah, I think based on last offseason, he was certainly involved in those Donovan Mitchell trade talks, and there were people in the organization who were very comfortable putting RJ Barrett in the trade to get Donovan Mitchell. Obviously, Leon Rose ultimately was not one of those people who was comfortable doing that. They decided to extend Barrett, decided not to trade for Donovan Mitchell. So, but I look at it through that prism, and I say to myself, if there were people over there who were willing to push, not to push him out, but to include RJ Barrett in a trade for a player like Donovan Mitchell, I would assume that those same people would be willing to include Barrett in a deal for another player of Mitchell's caliber. So I don't think anybody is untouchable other than who you said, Tommy, Jalen Brunson, in terms of big-time trades. But I do think, though, that there's an appreciation for how Barrett bounced back in the postseason. First 2 games didn't shoot it well, and then came on in a huge way for this Knicks team, was a big reason they won that Cleveland series and had a steady playoff performance. I got a question for you, Tommy. I want to know, where are you on Randle and Tibbs right now? I know you've been down on those guys in the past over certain segments of their time here. Where are you on those guys right now?
Yeah, I think they've earned the right to kind of proceed as they have been. I thought the Obi situation was untenable. I think it's unfortunate, kind of the way it's played out. I would certainly prefer Tibbs to hold Randle's feet to the fire a little bit more. I don't know whether he does that behind the scenes. I would encourage him to kind of, when there are instances of Randle not hustling, that bad body language that I think is a little bit contagious and can be detrimental to the overall impact of the team. That being said, I totally understand the front office's desire to hold Randall, and one of the reasons I think they value him so much is the same reason that Tibbs does, is because regular season wins matter. And very few players have provided the consistency, the durability, the production that Randall has. So I think it makes sense that they're committed to him going forward. We'll see how it plays out. And I understand they want to keep him, but if there is a strong suitor, if let's say, hypothetically, the Sixers want to do a deal and they don't want to hit the complete rebuild button, having Randall on that very team-friendly contract to send back is another situation that could benefit both parties. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I've been one who I've been waiting for the split of Tibbs and Randall. To me, I'm looking to see if Randall maybe could reach a new level with a new coach who will, like Tommy said, hold his feet to the fire. Okay, last one for you, Ian, because I would be remiss not to ask about it. You know it, I know it, Tommy knows it. The rumblings about Joel Embiid and whatever is going on with the situation in Philadelphia. We know James Harden has requested a trade. He's not happy. Joel Embiid saying that, I may win a championship here or elsewhere, which created a lot of headlines. And I know you reported that he had met with Daryl Morey to recommit essentially to the organization. Simple question. Why do the Knicks continue to be linked to Embiid, a guy who has not yet requested a trade? And by all accounts, the Sixers aren't looking to trade him.
Yeah, I think that's part of the nature of how kind of fans and media view the NBA landscape. But here, there's an organic connection. Leon Rose, Joel Embiid's former agent, and then you couple that with the fact that what we talked about earlier, the Knicks have the draft capital and young players to be involved in any kind of trade for a top star. And then you talked about the comments to Maverick Carter recently that Embiid made about wanting to win a title in Philly or anywhere else. And so you put all that conjecture together, and there's going to be a speculation about Embiid and his future. But yeah, EJ, I'm with you. Until he says to Daryl Morey, hey, it's time to move me, I'm demanding a trade. Until that happens, there's nothing really to talk about. And even if that were to happen, I don't think Daryl Morey would move him to the Knicks if all things were equal from different suitors and he had a package that maybe was 95 cents on the dollar to the Knicks package from another team. I would assume that he'd move him out of the division. So I think there's a lot of hurdles yet to be cleared until we can talk seriously about Joel Embiid to the Knicks. But the loose conversation, the speculation around it, I think is always going to be there, particularly with the uncertainty in Philadelphia right now around the James Harden situation.
As I've said before, the Knicks start dealing with Danny Ainge was difficult. Wait till they talk to Daryl Morey about his franchise player. I think that won't go maybe as smoothly as some Knicks fans would hope. Ian Begley, you can catch his work with SNY, both on television and on the website, sny.tv. Make sure you check out the new season of The Putback when that comes back as well. So, Ian, thank you again so much for joining us. Really do appreciate this time.
I appreciate you, fellas. Enjoy the rest of the summer. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. That was SNY's Ian Begley joining us. A lot of interesting things coming from Ian. Tommy, do you have any major takeaways from the sit down we just had?
Yeah, I just thought some good insight on a bunch of different topics, and I think the situation regarding Barrett, it's kind of the one thing I'm interested to see, and also I thought his opinion on IQ getting a deal done.
Yes.
I thought that was encouraging. I agree with him that the Knicks, certainly should prioritize signing quickly to an extension prior to the start of the season. I'm just curious if IQ's camp is as amenable to an extension. We just saw, we're recording this Thursday afternoon, a few hours after Jaylen Brown signed a deal that's greater than the gross domestic product of like 37 countries. So obviously IQ's not on that level, but just a sign that the cap rising is going to lead way to some really significant contracts, and IQ may feel he wants a piece of that.
Yeah, I would say that was also the biggest probably eyebrow raiser for me during this interview was the idea that an IQ deal gets done, and he's thinking maybe slightly south of 94 years, which I think most Knicks fans would sign up for that. I think some people may have been a little nervous about that going to 100 million. And I've talked about it on this podcast, feeling like the IQ negotiation could be the next major standoff this Knicks organization faces. But if you're talking about something south of 90 million for 4 years, I can't imagine there being a lot of pushback from the Knicks organization. But like you said, I think we'll be curious to see what the deal is with IQ and if that they can get that done. Also, to start the interview, Trevor Keels, and he mentioned the C word, which is something that I think I've danced around or maybe poked around a little bit, but he mentioned conditioning potentially being a problem with his time with the Knicks, and essentially it looking like his Knicks tenure is indeed over, which is pretty incredible considering he was just drafted last year. He was only 19 years old when they took him.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I think a lot of people had hinted at it and maybe not addressed it directly. I don't know if Keels has been asked about it, but it certainly seemed like it was a legitimate question. And EJ, you and I talked about it coming out of Vegas. I said I'd be surprised if he was part of the, if his two-way contract was still intact, because there's so much competition and so few spots, even with the two-way, the new CBA having 3 2-ways instead of 2. This doesn't mean that his time is, he'll never be a part of the organization. Nick still have his G League rights. I don't know if he wants to go play overseas, but if he feels, we got off to a slow start, and I'm sure the Knicks didn't want to burn any bridges. I'm sure he doesn't want to burn any bridges. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him go back to Westchester, and he's a talented kid. Played well enough at Duke, and the Knicks have a track record of drafting guys with talent. So we'll see if he can kind of earn his way back into the Knicks' good graces. But I like the Windler pickup for what it's worth. I thought it was
I wanted to ask you about that. What about the Windler pickup are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I think the idea of two-way contracts is to find a diamond in the rough. You don't necessarily need to find a guy that you're going to plug in on a Thursday night where you plug and play on a it's not like a reliever, left situational reliever in baseball, something along those lines. This is kind of those things where you take a big picture view and say, he's may not be able to contribute. We're not going to need him to contribute. Tibbs only plays 9 guys anyway. You take talent. NBA is still, after all the stuff we talk about, it's a talent-based league, and it's primarily a 3-point shooting league. It's a guy that shot, led the Ohio Valley Conference, shooting 43% as a senior at Belmont. He has not shot it well in the league. It's tough for shooters to find their rhythm when they're playing limited minutes and coming off the bench and dealing with injuries. Shot relatively well in the G League. He's a 6'8" guys that can shoot, and he's not a sieve defensively. Like, he can guard some guys. Yeah. Has some length. Again, there was a reason that a lot of teams wanted him in 2019 when he came out, and there's a reason he went first round. Pick him up, scoop him up, low risk, potential decent reward. I thought it was worth a roll of the dice.
Yeah, I like the Windler pickup a lot. I mean, I remember studying his game when coming out of the draft at Belmont, and it's crazy how his career has gone, because at Belmont, the guy was an Iron Man. I mean, this guy was 35 minutes a night, not missing any games. And it seems like as soon as he signed the NBA contract and the ink was dry, he just kept getting hurt. Broken wrist, hurt knee, hurt ankle last year. That ankle injury that they thought was going to maybe set him out for a month and a half. He ended up not being ready until February. He injured himself before the first preseason game of last year. So injuries have been a massive issue. And I read an interview he did, I think, in March of last year, where he finally started to get some time with the G League. And he said that, he finally feels like his body is back to where it needs to be after all these injuries. So Windler, he says, a guy who can shoot it. He's a very skilled offensive player, not the greatest athlete, but is a hard-nosed defensive kind of guy. I feel like if he can stay healthy, he has a shot in the NBA. He just hasn't had a shot given all the injuries. One of the things I saw also was that before he got hurt in Cleveland, they said he was having his best training camp of his career. And there was a lot of excitement that he'd actually be in the rotation for the Cavs. Think about that Cavs rotation, one that, did win all those games, but was missing clearly an offensive threat off that bench. Maybe he would have been that guy had he not got hurt. But that was a team that won 50-plus games. I mean, if they thought that Windler could play for them, and now you're getting this guy on a 2-way deal who knows what the Knicks may be getting in Windler if he can indeed stay healthy.
Yeah, definitely a guy, that's, if they had to use a roster spot on him, that's a little, that could potentially be an issue. But to get a guy like that, basically a free look at a player like that,
Yeah.
two-way, signing a two-way contract now lets him come to Westchester, practice with the team, get familiar with Tibbs. I'm sure all those guys look at there early. Like I said, it'll be fun to watch him, assuming he doesn't start the season with the Knicks and doesn't earn his way onto, even the back end of the rotation, see what he can do in Westchester for the G League Knicks.
I mentioned that he's been brittle, so I don't know if you want to throw him out there power forward, but if you are looking for that stretch forward to stand in the corner, yep. I mean, he would fit that role. He can absolutely do that. So maybe an interesting name to follow from that standpoint. When we asked Ian about the Knicks situation and the power forward situation, he essentially said they got to feel comfortable with it because adding a guy would mean going to 10 men, and the Knicks don't want to go to 10 men. Interesting that is still kind of the mindset for the Knicks coming into this offseason, that the 9-man rotation is the way to go. Last year, they did it from December on. Right. Can they survive doing that from October on and then into maybe a deep postseason run? That is a little bit of a question I would have, especially considering 2 years ago, they played 10 men and they were a really good team as well. So I wonder where they kind of figure the thing out where we can't play 10 men this year, but then 2 years ago it was fine and they were fourth in the Eastern Conference.
And also, I think it would be beneficial for the cornerstone guys, Randall, if you want to include Barrett in that, obviously Brunson, to limit their minutes during the regular season, something we've talked about. So maybe experiment with the 10 men and figure out, carve it down to 9 by February, March, somewhere along those lines, and all the while know that in important games, maybe not the in-season tournament. Let's say you put value on that. Maybe games against Atlantic Division opponents where they want to try to secure if towards the middle of the season they realize they might be a 4-3 battle, 5-4 battle in terms of playoff seeding, that they want to place a little more importance and only go with 9 guys certain nights, but ideally, hopefully, they kind of think big picture. But as we know, Tibbs is not much of a believer in the load management theories.
Yeah, I hold my breath when Tibbs embraces load management. Well, finally, the last question I had for him, which I think was one of the $1 million questions, annoyed I couldn't get a Brunson one in there, but I do appreciate Ian for his time. The Joel Embiid thing, because I tried to phrase it in a way that could maybe explain some things beyond just what we all see, because in theory it doesn't make sense. Like, why would the Sixers, unless they're ready to tank, even consider trading Joel Embiid unless he's gonna offer the fact that he wants to be traded? He doesn't want to play for the Sixers anymore, and that has not happened. Ian made that very clear. So from his end, he says there's really nothing to see here until that happens. So is there something else beyond, like Ian mentioned, the relationships that he's had with Leon Rose, relationships with CAA, that you think has led us here? I don't think Ian's holding anything back, but it does lead me to still ask the question, why do people think, besides just seeing the tea leaves, that Joel Embiid will eventually be a Knick? Because it's almost like it's coming like a unanimous thing when it's talked about Joel Embiid's future. Everybody says, look at New York. And then I feel like every time the Knicks then end up not getting these guys, it becomes the Knicks fans like Draymond Green said are delusional, when really it's the reporters, it's the media telling them that this is something to pay attention to.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's end of July and people are looking for stories. We haven't had much meat on the bone in terms of Lillard or Harden recently. We got folks on ESPN, who shall remain nameless, saying that the Knicks should get Lillard. So that's when that they're desperate for ears and eyes and talking points. So yeah, I think just his comments about Leon Rose, how close they are, and the relationships and all that stuff. It's fodder, between two big, kind of big six franchises with the Knicks and Sixers and MVP and all the assets the Knicks have. It's just naturally that things are going to kind of lead that way. And it's only a matter of time before the Donovan Mitchell stuff heats up again too. I just saw Bontemps the other day on one of those pods. I think it was Windhorst's pod. talking about, it's if he would trade Mitchell today if he was Cleveland, because you have 2 years if you trade him now as opposed to next summer. He's going to be a year away from having that player option. So yeah, if you're a Knicks fan, get ready for another kind of a round of where the Donovan Mitchell turns, and then next summer it'll be even amped up even further, assuming that Mitchell isn't traded and they don't make a deep run in the playoffs. Because if they were to lose in the first round or maybe even the second round, and he doesn't agree to a contract extension, that being said, if he gets that Jaylen Brown money in front of him, he gets, that may quell the concerns. So, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, the quote from Tim Bontemps: "I don't think there is any chance he signs an extension there ever." I mean, again, so you read these stories and you're just like, or these podcasts or these quotes, and you're just like, well, shoot, well, what's going on? It's almost like it's reading a book, but then like the chapter doesn't finish. So like, all right, he doesn't sign an extension. So then what's gonna happen? Because there's gonna eventually be a rubber meets the road moment, and I feel like we're not that far down the road with Embiid clearly, but it almost feels like that's where we're getting to, where eventually it's gonna be a Joel Embiid definitely doesn't want to stay here. It's gonna be all right. So then what's gonna happen? Like Ian Big said, will Moore even play ball with the Knicks? Like he mentioned a great point about the trading within the division not being something he wants to do.
And we saw it with Ainge, who clearly was charging attacks. Yeah, it's like binging a series, and a series is 5 seasons, and so your buddy tells you to watch it. Now we just saw at the end of season 2, and they give you the cliffhanger, like what happens next.
Yeah, NBA is a crazy world, but I want to thank everybody for checking out this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods. I especially want to thank our special guest Ian Begley once again for joining us on this episode of Orange and Blue Bloods. This is a podcast you can get wherever you get your shows, including the free Odyssey app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service to get these episodes every time we drop. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube as well. You can find full episodes as well as clips of our show on the WFAN channel. So make sure you check us out there. Tommy, let people know they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter.
You can find me, Stewart, on Twitter. And if you're following the CBS Sports radio station, I am producing the DA show for the rest of this week as well. So if you want to tune in 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., wherever you, again, Odyssey app, also find us on SiriusXM. Also can find us on YouTube on the CBS Sports channel as well if you want to check me out there. But that's going to do it for this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods. Thank you guys again so much for checking us out. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.